Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is just hit H on the keyboard to open up the objects list, and you can also do that by clicking on this button up at the top. Alright, so we'll just select our two mental ray omnis as well as our skylight. We'll just delete them from the scene so we have no lights in here. Alright, we'll also grab this box thing we made and delete that. We really don't need to have that in here for this V-Ray part. Okay, and I'm just going to readjust the camera a little bit here. And let's also turn on our safe frame maybe. And it's going to zoom it in a little bit more. Okay, so let's go up into the rendering menu, and we're going to go down to the bottom here and switch our renderer from mental ray to V-Ray. Okay, and if you haven't actually purchased V-Ray, you won't be able to follow this last section here of the tutorial. V-Ray doesn't come included with Max. It's a separate plugin renderer for it, so you'll have to install that separately, and then you'll be able to follow along with the tutorial here. Okay, so we'll go into the renderer here, and let's actually just close up a couple of these tabs. Alright, so we'll do a test renderer right off the start to see what it looks like with no lights. And it's going to look pretty much like it did with Mentray or the scanline, pretty crappy with no lighting in the scene. Alright, so we'll just close that one. Let's minimize this. Alright, so we'll go down into the indirect illumination tab first here. Okay, and we're going to turn that on. Alright, now give us basic global illumination in the scene. For our primary bounces, we're going to leave that at 1, and we're going to use the irradiance map. For the secondary bounces, we're also going to leave that at 1, and we're going to use Quasi Monte Carlo for the GI engine. Okay, so pretty much leave these at the defaults. Alright, let's close that rollout. We'll go down to the irradiance map, and it'll be set to high by default here for a preset. We'll take this down to very low, alright, just so we have quicker renders here when we're testing the lighting. Let's also take the subdivs down to say 20. And I'm going to take show calculation phase so we can actually see it calculating the light in the scene. Okay, so let's hit render again. And it'll do 2 pre-passes before it actually renders it out. Alright, so you can see that's got some GI in there, but it doesn't look very good right now at all. Alright, so let's just close that. And let's just minimize this for a second. We'll go back into the material editor. Right. And let's grab a new slot here, and we're going to use the V-Ray material for the shaders here. Okay, so we're going to click the standard button, choose V-Ray material, and you can use a standard material, but you'll probably get a better result if you switch it to a V-Ray material. Okay, so we're going to leave the diffuse color here at the standard 128 gray shader on the RGB. Okay, and we'll hit H again, select our objects here, and we'll deselect the plane. Okay, we're going to use a different color on that, so just select the objects in the center there, and we'll apply that gray shader to them. Okay, and let's maybe clone this over to the next slot here. Okay, and we'll change the diffuse color on this one to a dark gray. So let's do 40 on the RGB. Okay, and we'll just select the plane there in the background and apply this one to it. And we'll just rename that something, and okay. Alright, and let's do another test render. Alright, so that's what we're going to start with, and you can see it doesn't look very good at all. It's pretty dark, so let's just clone this one, and we'll just work our way up in the settings. So let's go back up into the rendering menu, okay, and we're going to close up the irradiance map tab there, and we'll go down into the environment. Okay, and let's check this on here, and this is an override for the environment light, or the indirect light in the scene. Okay, so if we do a render, you can see it's going to be a lot brighter. And it's also going to have a little bit of a blue shade to it. Okay, let's clone that. And that's because the light in the scene is actually being controlled by this color swatch here. Alright, so if we switch this to a different color, let's do red maybe, and render again, you'll see that'll completely change the indirect light in the scene. And in this case, that's all the light in the scene. We have no additional lighting. Okay, so that's like an overall tint again for the scene. Let's just take that back. Okay, and we have a multiplier here, and if you take this up to like 3 and render, it's going to be obviously 3 times as bright. Okay, so let's just cancel that one. And what we're going to do in this case is actually use a high dynamic range image to light the scene here. So let's open up the material editor. Okay. And we're going to grab another new slot, and let's go to the Get Material button here, and we'll scroll down to the bottom, and we're going to choose V-Ray HDRI here. So double click that. Alright, we'll close that. And this will let you actually choose an HDRI image for the scene here. Okay, so I'm just going to hit Browse. Alright, and I have a couple here. And if you don't have any HDRIs, you can download them from a few places online for free. Okay, so if you go over to openfootage.net and into the HDRI panorama section, you can download a bunch of really good HDRIs for free. Alright, they have some small versions as well as some giant plate versions. Alright, so we're just going to be using small versions for lighting in our scene. And I'm going to be using the bridge one, the ocean one, and the autumn forest one. Alright, so you'll find those in the panoramic section of openfootage.net. Or if you already have some HDRIs, you can just use those for the tutorial here. You don't have to use these same ones. And you can also do a search on Google for them. And you just want to make sure that the extension is HDRI or EXR. You don't want to use a JPEG because it won't work for this. Okay, so it has to be a 32-bit float point format. Alright, so I'm just going to pick one here. Let's grab maybe the autumn forest and open it. Okay, and we'll go up here and double click the material slot. And you can see that's pretty dark here. It's also distorted. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is check on spherical environment to make sure that it's properly displayed here. Okay, let's just move that down here. And we're going to grab the slot up here, the material slot, and we're actually going to drag it over into the environment map box here. Okay, and let go on that. And we're going to choose an instance here so that any changes we make inside the material editor will automatically update in the box here. Okay, so choose instance and OK. And if we do a render now, you'll see this is completely different. Okay, it's also pretty dark. So let's clone that. And we'll close that one. Let's close this for a second. And you'll see now that if we change the color swatch to another color here and do another render, it's not going to affect the render at all. Okay, it's going to look exactly the same as it did before. Alright, let's just cancel that guy. And the same goes with the multiplier. If we were to take this up to like 10 and render, it's not going to affect the scene at all. Okay, so let's cancel that one. And the reason for that is the HDRI image is overwriting these settings here. Alright, so these have really no effect anymore in the scene, the color or the multiplier here. Alright, so if we actually wanted to brighten up the scene or the GI in the scene, we need to brighten up the HDRI image. Okay, and we can do that by adjusting the multiplier in the material editor. Alright, so let's take this up a bit. Let's do like 3. Alright, and you'll see the image get a lot brighter there. And it'll automatically be updated in the render settings here. So let's render again. Okay, you can see already that's going to look quite a bit different. It's a lot brighter than it was before. Okay, so let's compare that to the other one. Right, so you can see we have a lot more light in the scene. It's also got a lot more color variation. Okay, so let's close those two, and we'll close this for a second. So let's maybe take the multiplier up a little bit more on this. Let's do 5. And let me just jump into Photoshop here so we can actually see what the image looks like. And here it is here. All right, let's view that at actual size. And you'll see it actually looks pretty much like a normal photo, besides the distortion around the edges up here. And that's just because this has been captured on as a reflection on either a mirror ball or a chrome ball and then unwrapped off into a flat image, which is the standard way that HDRIs are captured. But yeah, it looks pretty much like a normal photo, but it's actually not. This contains much more color information and lighting information than a standard image would, like a JPEG. A standard image is clamped down to a color scale of 0 to 255. So 0 would be the darkest pixel or the blackest pixel, and 255 would be the brightest or whitest pixel that the image can contain. Whereas a 32-bit image like this, HDRI, can actually contain a way higher range of colors. So you might have a white pixel here that's actually a couple of thousand rather than 255 white. and your eye can't see it when you look at it, and most computer monitors can't actually display it, but the lighting information is actually contained in the image. So when you put this into the environment in Max and render, the render can actually detect the values of each pixel. So when you put this into the environment in Max, it's pretty much wrapped around the scene, and each of the pixels is casting its color and its light information into the scene. Alright, so let's go back into Max here, and let's just close that guy. Let's do another test render with the multiplier at 5. Okay, so we have a little bit more of a brighter image here, and you also notice a little bit of blotching on the background plane, and that's just the light from the HDRI. Okay, so we're not going to worry about that right now. Let's do a clone of this and minimize it, and let's just switch out maybe the HDRI image to something else just to see what it'll look like when we render. Okay, so let's go back to browse here, and we'll pick another one. Let's pick the ocean one, right? And it looks like this. It's a lot more bright than the previous image. Okay, so let's take the multiplier down to maybe 1, and we'll just do a test render here. Alright, and that looks pretty much like what we had before. Alright, so let's take the multiplier up a little bit more. Let's do maybe 3, and we'll do another render. Okay, and you can see that looks a lot better, and we also have a lot more color bleeding in the scene. Alright, so let's maybe do a clone of this one and minimize it, and let's just close these up, and we'll add a couple of additional lights in here as well. You can get away without doing it if you want. You could just use the HDRI image, but we'll just do some quick lighting here just to give it some more variation on the shading. So let's go up into the create panel and to lighting. Alright, and we're going to switch this from standard lights to V-Ray lights. Okay, and we'll just use the normal standard V-Ray light here. We're not going to use the V-Ray sun. Okay, and I'm just going to go into the left view. We'll zoom back a bit, and we're just going to draw out a light here. And we're going to do it pretty big. Okay, maybe something like that. Alright, pretty much the front of the plane to the top of the plane here. Okay, and we'll move it back to the side in the top view. Just pull that back a bit. We'll give it some space between the edge of the plane and the light. Let's do maybe something like that. And let's maybe change the color on this one, and I'm going to do a slight orangish light here. Let's do maybe something like that, just kind of a creamy color there. Alright, and I'm going to leave the multiplier at 30 right now, but we'll probably have to take that down quite a bit. Okay, and let's maybe do a mirror on this light, and we'll choose copy, and OK, and we'll move this one over to the right side. Okay, and this is going to be pretty much a quick version of a studio lighting rig. It's not going to be a perfect one, but just a quick version. And if you actually want to learn how to build a really good studio lighting rig, my brother Chris actually has a good tutorial on how to do that with V-Ray. And it's not on CG Tuts, but you can find that on his personal website, which is christateonline.com. Alright, so for the right light here, let's change the color of this one to maybe a blue. Right, and we'll do a pretty light blue here. Let's do something like that. Alright, you can match it by matching the RGB here. Okay, and let's also leave this one at 30 just temporarily. Okay, so we'll do another render here, and it's probably going to be blown out a bit and also have quite a bit of noise in the scene, but we'll see. So I'm just going to pause this. Okay, so there we go, and you can see that looks drastically different than the previous one. Okay, we also have a lot more noise, but that's just because we have really low settings in the radiance map and in the H subs. Okay, so we're not going to worry about the noise right now. We'll take care of that later on. And you can also see that the light is way too intense. We pretty much lost the orange color as well as the blue here because it's blown out with this white shade. Okay, so let's do a clone of this, minimize it. Okay, and I'm just going to get rid of a couple of the other ones that we have down the bottom here. Okay, we don't really need them. And let's take the multiplier on the blue light down a bit. Let's do maybe something like 13. Okay, and we'll also take the multiplier down on the left light here. Let's take that down to maybe 15. Okay, we'll leave it a little bit brighter on the one side than the other. Okay, so let's do another render here of F9. Alright. Okay, so you can see it's quite a bit darker, but we do have some of our blue and yellow light back here. It's not so intense. Okay, so we'll go with something like this for now, and let's do, maybe close this one, we'll do a clone of this guy, and minimize it. Alright, and you can see the front is pretty dark. Let's put another light in facing the scene here. Alright, so I'm just going to close that. We'll go into the front view. Okay, and let's go back into the lighting tab here, grab another V-Ray light, and we're going to drag a small one out in the center here. I'm going to keep it pretty small. Let's just center that a bit. And in the left view here, we'll move it back just a little bit in from the edge of the plane. I'm going to move it up slightly, and I'm also going to rotate it so it's more facing down at the objects here. Okay, we also don't have any kind of ceiling on our rig here. Usually a studio lighting rig will have a ceiling, or at least a little bit of a extrusion out here so it can bounce some light back in. But for this one, I don't think we really need to worry about that, so we're going to leave the top off. Let's just point that down like that. Okay, and we'll go into the modified panel here, and let's change the color on this one to white. So do pretty much straight white, and we'll take the multiplier way down to maybe 4. Okay, and then we'll do another test render here and see how it looks. Okay, so you can see it's a little bit more bright here than the previous one. Alright, so overall we're getting pretty even light in the scene. We have some pretty good shading here. Obviously we have a lot of noise, but we'll get rid of that in a little bit. Alright, so let's close the other render here. We don't really need that guy. And let's maybe take the multiplier up to 5 instead of 4 here on the front light. Okay, just to brighten it up a little bit more. Okay, and let's maybe just minimize this. Alright, now I think I'm actually going to switch out the HDRI image here. Okay, so I'm going to change this to the bridge low version here. Okay, and this is what it looks like. Right, you can see it's pretty bright. Let's take the multiplier down to 1. Okay, so it's back to its normal illuminance. Okay, so we'll close that, and let's do another render here and see if that looks a little better. Okay, so there we go, and we'll compare it to the last one. And you can see it's quite a bit brighter, even though we took the multiplier down on the HDRI. Alright, and that's just because the HDRI is a lot more bright, this particular one, than the last one we were using, as well as the 5 on the multiplier instead of the 4. Okay, so this is more of an evenly lit scene, and it looks a lot better than this one does. Okay, so we'll close that. Alright, so let's make a clone of this guy, and we'll minimize that one. And overall, the illumination in the scene is pretty good. Everything looks pretty even. We have some nice smooth shadows here. We really just need to concentrate on reducing the amount of noise in here. Okay, so let's do that now. We'll close the material editor, and let's go back into the render settings. Okay, and let's just close up the radiance map here and the environment tab for now. Okay, so let's go into the adaptive subdivision here, the sampling. Okay, and we're going to change the color threshold here to something a little bit lower. Okay, so we'll take that down to maybe 0.05. Okay, and let's do another render here. Okay, there it is, and let's compare it to the last one. And you can see we have a lot less noise. We still have some, but we're getting there. It's getting a lot crisper. Okay, so let's close this guy, clone this one again. Right, and let's see. We're going to leave it on adaptive subdivision here, and we're also going to leave it on the area filter. You have a whole bunch of different ones here that you can use, but for this particular scene, I think I'll just leave it on area and adaptive subdivision here. Okay, we'll go back down into the radiance map here, and when you get your settings pretty much pounded out, or your lighting pounded out, and you're pretty much sure that it's going to look the way you want, that's when you want to go up on the settings here. You don't want to go too high off the start, else it's going to just take forever to do your test renders. Alright, so always start out low and work your way up as you get it tweaked out. Alright, so I'm going to take the subdivisions here back up to 50, and I'm also going to switch the preset here to medium. Okay, and let's see what we get with that. It's going to take a lot longer to render, but we'll see how much of a difference it makes. Alright, so I'm just going to pause while this renders, and I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so there it is, and we'll compare it to the last one. And there's not a lot of difference between them. It's a little bit brighter, and it's a little bit more smooth. It's a little hard to tell with all the noise in here, and I'm sure with the compression on the video it probably doesn't look that good, but we're getting there. We just need to get rid of some of this additional noise in the background as well as in the shadows here. Okay, so let's close this guy, and we'll clone this one and minimize it. Okay, so the only thing you really need to worry about for your noise or getting rid of noise is the control thresh here, or the color thresh. The lower this goes, the longer it'll take to render, but the smoother your result will be. You can also play with the min and max rates here, but by just lowering this number, you can pretty much take care of most noise problems in your renders. Okay, so we'll take that down to 0.005, which is pretty low. It's going to add a lot of render time, but it should give us a pretty smooth result. So we'll do one more test render here and see how it looks. Okay, so there we go, and you'll notice that took quite a while longer to render. The last one we did took about 2 minutes, this one took about 14. Alright, so you're definitely going to pay for it in render time by lowering the color threshold down. Okay, so let's compare this to the last one, and you can see that looks a lot better. Most of the noise is virtually all gone. We only have a little bit in the shadow here and on here. Okay, but other than that, everything's smoothed out and it looks pretty nice. Okay, so we'll close this guy. And we could fix this noise here by going a little bit lower on the color thresh here, or playing with the min and max rate a little bit, as well as the samples. Here you can take this up a little bit higher, maybe 60, or you could even do a higher preset here. Alright, and if you do go to high, it'll do an extra prepass, and the more prepass it does, the more accurate it'll be. Okay, so it'll take a little longer to render, but you can go up to high on this, or take the samples up a little bit higher here, and that's pretty much how you get rid of the additional little bit of noise that's left in the render. Okay, but I don't think we really need to worry about that for this tutorial. Okay, so let's make a clone of this one, and I did say I would show how to get rid of the plane in the background here if you wanted to composite this on to something else. Okay, if we go to the ELF channel here, you can see it's solid white. Alright, so that's really not going to work if you want to composite it. You need to have these objects cut out of the background. Okay, so we'll look at how to do that now. Just close that guy. Okay, so let's go back into the render settings here, and let's just put this back so it won't take as long to render for this test here. Okay, so I'm going to put the threshold back to 0.1, and I'm going to change the 3DsMax map back to very low, and we'll take the samples back down to 20. Okay, and we'll just do a render here. Alright, so obviously if you wanted to composite these objects onto another background, this kind of render won't work. And if you go to the ELF channel, you can see it's solid white, alright, which isn't going to help you at all. You may as well not even have it. Alright, so we need to get rid of that background plane so that these are cut out, or can be cut out with a mask. Alright, so let's clone this render, and we'll just close this and this. And depending on the scene, there's a few ways to get rid of the plane depending on what you're doing. Okay. Occasionally you can just grab the background plane and delete it, and do another render here. Okay, and you can see that that pretty much looks the same as this render. Okay, even without the plane in the background. Alright, and that's just because we have the additional V-Ray lights on both sides, as well as the one in the front and the HDRI in the environment. Okay, so in this particular scene, deleting the plane might actually be an option for you to get a proper ELF channel here. Okay, so let's delete that, and let's just undo that so we get our plane back. In another scene, though, deleting the plane might drastically change the lighting in this, on the objects. All right, and we don't have a roof on our light rig here. If you did have this extruded out and over the top, so you have a roof on there, and you had light bouncing around on the inside, deleting the plane really won't help you, because it's obviously not going to calculate any bounce light without the plane in there. Right, so that'll drastically change the look of the render. Okay, in this particular scene it really doesn't matter because we don't have any real light bouncing down from the roof here. Okay, but if you did have that, another way to get rid of the plane and still calculate the proper bounce of the light would be to select the plane, right click, and go into the object properties here. Okay, and if you take off visible to camera here, all right, and then we re-render, and you'll see that the camera won't render the background plane, all right, and we have a proper alpha channel here. Okay, even though the plane's in there, the camera can't see it. But in this situation, it'll still calculate any bounce light in the scene. All right, so it'll be similar to deleting the plane, but you'll still get the calculation of additional bounces off of the plane and back onto the objects. All right, so this is usually the way you'd cut the objects out of the background without affecting the lighting. Okay, so you just have the proper alpha channel there. And if you save this image out as a PNG or anything that supports an alpha channel, you can just composite this onto another background in Photoshop. Right? And if you save it as a PNG, it'll actually mask it out for you. You won't really need to do a mask in Photoshop. It'll actually just cut these out on a transparent background, and you can just slap them onto another image inside of Photoshop. Okay, so that's usually the technique I use, is just make the plane invisible to the camera. Alright, and let's just go back into the object properties. We'll turn this back on. Alright, so it'll render normal. And another way to get rid of the plane, if you were actually trying to put a plate in the background here and render these objects on it, on top of the image inside of Max, we'd also need to get rid of the plane, but you'd want to keep any shadows underneath the objects. Okay, so how you do that would be go up to the environment slot and put your image in here, obviously, or you can do it a different way, but we'll just do it this way for this. And let's just pick our material editor here, and we'll just choose our HDRI image, and okay. All right, we'll put a copy in there so it'll actually render that image in the environment instead of just the black background. Okay, so to get rid of the plane here, we'll right click again and we'll go down to the V-Ray properties. Okay, and we want to tick off matte object. Okay, so tick that on, and we also want to tick on shadows here, and we can even do alpha channel. Okay, so we'll close that, and now if we do a render with F9, let me just pause here for a second. Okay, so you can see that that actually rendered on top of the background image, and we still actually have the shadows underneath the objects here. Okay, so it's still calculating the plane as if it was in the environment, as well as the bounce lighting, but it's not showing up in the render at all. Okay, so that's how you'd still get the information from the plane without actually having it in the environment. Okay, so any of these techniques will work to get rid of the plane based on whatever your scene is and whatever the setup is for the lighting and such. Okay. Okay, so that's a look at how to get a decent clay render, whether you're using the scanline render, mental ray, or V-Ray, as well as a couple of different light setups and techniques. There's a lot of ways to do a basic GI render, but I hope you learned something from these techniques and got good results on your own. Alright, so I think that'll about wrap it up, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.